Good morning. Hayom Yom, Beis Sivan, the 46th day of the Omer. So the Rebbe begins by telling us two things about our Friday night prayers. Number one is in our Friday night prayers, right before Likkutei, we say a small paragraph, the Ana B'chayach paragraph. And the Rebbe says we should say it, but we should say it quietly. We should say it in a whisper. The second thing he says is that in our Friday night prayers, right before Shemini Esrei, so we say the words Ufreis Aleinu. Hashem, please spread over us your protective layer of peace. And he says, while we're saying those words, we should stand up. And actually, the Arizal explains that the reason for this is that by standing up, we are bracing ourselves, and it helps us to receive the extra soul that it says Jews receive, Jews get on Shabbos. On Shabbos, we get a neshama yisera, an extra neshama, an extra soul, extra spiritual strength, extra spiritual fortitude, which gives us inner peace. Then the Rebbe proceeds to say the following. He said, in the year 1829, so Shabbos Bamidbar fell out on Beis Sivan. It was Erev Shavuos. And right before Shabbos, late Friday afternoon, right before candle lighting, so the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, said a Maamar. And the Maamar was on the words from the second pasuk in Shabbos Bamidbar, on Parshas Bamidbar, and the words are Su'u es Reish, which can be translated in two ways. One way of translating it is take the heads of the Jewish people. And the other interpretation given by the Ibn Ezra is lift up the heads of the Jewish people. And both these interpretations are actually given in Parshas Kisisa. But those are the two interpretations in the word. Now, both of them basically mean the same thing. It means take a head count, take a census, count the Jewish people. But based on the Ibn Ezra's translation, that it literally means pick up the heads of the Jewish people, the Tzemach Tzedek interpreted it as follows. He said, Su'u es Reish Avaisa means that our souls have different parts, different layers. There are parts of our souls, there are layers in our souls, there are elements of our soul that are in this world, that are present in this world, that are engaged in the world. And then there are parts of our soul that never enter the world, never come into the world, are not engaged in the world, are not involved with the world. And just what that means, very simply, is even take, for example, when you're doing something very mindless, a very mindless activity, so your mind is probably going to be checked out, or you might not be so emotionally invested. In other words, the higher elements of your being, the more refined elements of your being, the higher parts of yourself, your mind and your heart, are going to be disengaged, are going to be checked out. Other things, though, are going to engage your mind. So in a very similar way, we basically say that there are certain parts of our personality, or there are certain parts of our neshama, which are never engaged by anything in the world. There's nothing in this world that can engage those parts of our neshama. This world is too boring, is too low, is too materialistic to engage, to turn on, to activate the deeper parts of our soul, the deeper parts of our neshama. And those parts never enter the world, never engage with the world. But the Tzemach Tzedek said that we have the power to lift up our heads. We have the power to lift up avoisam. We have the power through our actions in the lower parts of our soul, through the actions of our body, we have the power to actually deeply impact and deeply affect the higher elements and the higher parts of our soul. The parts that have never entered the world, through the part that is in the world, through the actions we do in the world, through how we choose to live our lives, we are actually having a profound impact and effect on the deeper parts of our soul, the deeper parts of our neshama. And again, just take, for example, if you're doing a certain physical activity with your body, that might affect you in an emotional way. It might emotionally stimulate you in some way. Even though your emotions are not a physical thing. But in other words, what you're doing with your physical body can affect and impact deeper parts of your being. So in a similar way, what we do with the part of our neshama which is in this world, with our thoughts, speech, and actions, with our mind, with our hearts, with our bodies, that has profound impact, and that deeply impacts and affects the higher parts of our soul, the deeper parts of our neshama. And that is only one pasuk that the Tzemach Tzedek explained in this Maamar. But he went on to explain many psukim, according to Chassidus, and he explained many passages in the Zohar and many passages in Medrash, and that was the wonderful, beautiful Maamar that the Tzemach Tzedek said. Then the next day, which is Shabbos Bamidbar, so the Tzemach Tzedek said a second Maamar. And the second Maamar was on the words from the last pasuk of the Haftorah of Shabbos Bamidbar, the words, V'erastich li la'olam, where Hashem says, I will make you marry me forever. Me and you are going to get married, and it's going to be forever, it's going to be great. And the Tzemach Tzedek said a Maamar on those words, and he gave all kinds of explanation and all kinds of elaboration, which is actually now printed in the Likkutei Torah, so you're able to read it and learn it for yourself in the Likkutei Torah. Then the next day, the first day of Shavuos, Vav Sivan, the Tzemach Tzedek said a third Maamar. And the third Maamar was on the words, Usvartam Lechem, you should count. And again, the Tzemach Tzedek gave all kinds of explanation and all kinds of elaboration, which those explanations and elaborations are now printed in Likkutei Torah, so you can go read it, you can go learn it yourself. And then the next day, on the second day of Shavuos, the Tzemach Tzedek said a fourth Maamar, and the fourth Maamar was on the words, V'hachachma me'ayin t'matzah. Chachma comes from ayin. Chachma comes from a state of nothingness. And again, he gave all kinds of elaboration and explanation, and that is now printed in Likkutei Torah as the second explanation of the concept of counting for 50 days. There's a concept to count for 50 days, and there's two explanations written there in the Likkutei Torah, and the second explanation is basically the explanations that the Tzemach Tzedek shared in this Maamar. And that is the Hayom Yom. And years later, in Tafshin Memches in 1988, so again, the calendar fell out in the exact same way that it fell out in 1829, and Hayom Sivan Shabbos was Shavous Maamarim, was Erev Shavuos, and a few days earlier, on Gimel Sivan, on Thursday, the Rebbe spoke publicly. And the Rebbe explained that time is not a linear thing, it's a circle. And in this circle, there's a couple of pockets and windows of time. But because of that, when you do something today, and then time passes, it's not gone forever. It's not like time has passed, and that's in the past, and it's over with, it's done. It's in the past, it doesn't matter anymore. He said no, because time's not linear, time's circular. So when we come back next year, when we make full circle, when we come back to today's anniversary, we are back in the exact same window of time. And anything that was done in that time, anything that was done in that window is present, is there, is potent, is alive. And there's just these windows of time, these days of the year, which every anniversary they come up, they're getting more and more full with whatever people are doing then. So anything that happens in a certain day affects basically that day for all of time. And the Rebbe said this is more true when the calendar falls out in the exact same way, when 2 years the calendar falls out the same way. Because then there's an extra level of alignment, there's an extra level of synchronization between the 2 days, between the anniversaries. So the Rebbe said, since this year has the exact same kvias, the calendar has fallen out the exact same way as the year 1829, therefore the Maamarim that the Tzemach Tzedek shared on these days are very active right now. And because of that, the Rebbe said, everybody on Friday afternoon, before lighting candles, should learn the Maamar the Tzemach Tzedek, Su'u Resh. And then on Shavous Maamarim, a few days later, the Rebbe himself said a Maamar, and the Maamar was on the words, Ve'erastich li la'olam. And then on Shavuos, the Rebbe shared another Maamar, and that was on the words, V'hachachma me'ayin t'matzah. And just on a side note, this is basically connected with the idea that we say that this that God gave us the Torah a long time ago is not something in the past. God is giving us the Torah right now. Every Shavuos, God is re-giving us the Torah. And we have to reconnect with it and realize that Hashem is giving us the Torah right now, today. And the Rebbe basically felt that the Torah that the Rabbeim gave, the Chassidus that the Rabbeim shared, and in general, but specifically the Chassidus they shared around Shavuos time, which is the time of sharing Torah, the time of giving Torah, the time of sharing Torah and Chassidus, that Chassidus is always relevant, it's always alive, it's always real. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.